All right. So the recording should have started. And it's funny we don't get that little disclaimer, but that's okay. What I want to do is I want to kind of give us a little bit of an overview of Drive in this professional selling course. So I'm going to begin by sharing my screen, and I'm hoping that this helps us understand kind of our expectations over the next few weeks. And so here in our Drive Moodle, we've already achieved all of our quizzes. We've completed our business interview. You've completed your LinkedIn. We've done our midterm. So this is the final part of this course, and it really is different than probably any other course you've taken before. So here we want to do one-on-one role plays where you're going to be actively engaging with me. You're going to play the role of the seller. I will play the role of the buyer. And we're going to use a system called Drive Selling, a part of which you would have read about inside of your textbook called spin selling. And so as we kind of go through this, it'll start to make more sense as we go through it. So let me just begin with these modules. First of all, you'll notice here inside of our Drive, we've got some different folders here. I've kind of got a folder here called Drive Instructions. And in this Drive Instructions folder, we've got our grading rubric. Always important to know about how we're going to be assessed at the end of this module. This won't make much sense now, but as we continue to go through the module, you'll see how this makes perfect sense, and you'll also see how to earn marks as we do these one-on-one role plays. Again, I don't expect you to understand this right now. I just want you to have an understanding of where this is and maybe go back and look at it, particularly before the final exam, because this is how we're going to be, this is how I'm going to be scoring your role play. So the role play itself begins with here. And we're probably going to even do a little bit of this today. We're going to do introduction, small talk, and set an agenda. It's kind of our first component of Drive. What's important is when we think about Drive, Drive is basically an acronym that stands for direction, rapport, inquiry, value, and execution. And perhaps I'll first introduce you to that. And I'd created a PowerPoint presentation on this. I mean, it's not awesome PowerPoint presentation, but I'll give you the overview anyway. So with this system, what we want to try to do is we want to try to get you, I'm going to switch my screens. Hang on one second. Oops, there we go. So what we want to try to do is to give you a system in order to do sales in a better way. And in order to build confidence in you using the system, we're going to use these role plays. A couple acronyms have been created. One by Wes Sebastiuk here in the NAIT School of Business called Drive, and one which is called Spin Selling, which was created by a fellow by the name of Neil Rackham. And the spin selling methodology is based on something like 30,000 sales calls. So it's really well researched, really well documented, and it's quite fundamental to this Drive system. The Drive system kind of expands upon that original concept and fills in some gaps, if you will. So what is Drive? Drive is basically an acronym that stands for direction, rapport, inquiry, value, and execution. And so with each one of these components, it's to kind of remind you about what you have to do in order to prepare for a sales call and how to navigate yourself during that sales call. And so the first thing to understand is direction. And what is direction? So direction is about making sure you've taken the time to fully understand the features and benefits of your product, and also to understand who it is you're going to be speaking to. So you might try to understand what is their vertical, like, so are they in produce? Are they in manufacturing? Are they in whatever? Are they government? Are they non-for-profit? To just take the time to make sure you understand kind of who it is you're going to go see. But direction is a critical component to this, because it's really about preparation. And to come into a meeting unprepared, not knowing your own features and benefits, not knowing the client, not knowing their vertical, is a recipe for disaster and probably embarrassment not only for yourself, but your entire organization. So don't do that. Come prepared. And so for ourselves, you will always be the company you've been assigned. For simplicity's sakes, I've assigned you all Lift All as the company you will always be. So your role in the role play is always going to be Lift All Forklift. You're selling Lift All forklifts. My role in the role play will change to kind of mix it up a little bit for yourselves and to try to maybe understand and unlock what are the features and benefits that would benefit me wearing these kind of, I will say, different hats. But anyway, so here we go. So direction is about that foundational understanding that you're doing and preparing before you ever come to this meeting. And you'll see inside of our modules that there'll be different role plays for you to read. But for sure, there's a background sheet for the company you've been assigned. It's super important you read through that background sheet, and it's super important that you actually take the time to write out your features and benefits. Cool. The component number one. Now begins the meeting. So what happens? So typically in a meeting, you're going to walk into that meeting, you're going to introduce yourself. I'm super adamant that when you introduce yourself, this is where in your textbook that talks about a firm handshake or what have you. But what I'm what I'm really whether so with COVID, I'm often a little bit more cautious about the firm handshake. But bring sanitizer. No, I'm just kidding. But you might do a firm handshake. That's great. But if you're meeting virtually, kind of like we are now, that's okay. But always introduce yourself and the company that you're representing. And that's super important because it kind of establishes you in that target market's mind, and it helps them kind of um, understand where you're coming from. And in marketing, we often refer to that as positioning. So it helps to position you and why you're there. So if I say I'm Ray with Lululemon, okay. If I say I'm Ray with McDonald's, oh, okay. If I say I'm Ray with Tesla, oh, okay. That's probably a little bit different. And so each of those things are going to, and I hope you felt that when I said those brands, associated those brands with myself. And I hope each of you were able to kind of feel like, oh, okay, now I know who that person is. And we call that in marketing positioning. So I think that's really, really important. I'm sure you're all familiar with the term positioning, but it's really, really important in your introduction that you introduce yourself and your company for that reason. It immediately helps establish your credibility and start to set some expectations in my mind. So the next thing that happens after you introduce yourself is rapport. And this is where genuinely just be a good human being, right? So I always talk personally when I think about building trust, I refer to a paper by Schurman, Mayer, and Davies called An Integrated Model of Organizational Trust. And you're welcome to Google that, read the paper. I think for all of us, understanding how trust is created is critical. My interpretation of that paper, which has been cited about 14,000 times, so it's a really strong authority, My interpretation of that paper is, regardless of your uh, your your predisposition towards trusting or not, three key components must be established in order to build trust. One, ability, and that's your ability to do the thing. And this is why those knowing your company's features and benefits are super important. Two, we call this integrity. And this is basically, are you a good member of the community? Three is benevolence. And what my interpretation of the paper when it talks about benevolence is, do you have my best interest in mind? Benevolence, do you have my best interest in mind? And so this is really your opportunity to begin to establish that benevolence. And here's the other thing I'll say is, with those three components, if any one of those three components falls to zero, it's a multiplier. And so if you don't have the ability, my trust in you doing that thing drops to zero. So for example, I might really like you as a person, you're a great member of the community, but I'm probably not going to bring my car to you to be fixed if you don't have any background as being a mechanic. I'm not going to bring my taxes to you to do my taxes. I'm certainly not going to ask you to remove my appendix if you're not a doctor. So that's where the ability is a key factor. And you have to understand your company, your organization, your features and benefits, and your arguably your target market's features and benefits in order to really establish that ability. In terms of integrity, being a good member of the community, you could try to slip into a conversation. This is where, just be conscious of volunteering in the community, volunteering for a youth group, anything like that. But in terms of benevolence, do you have my best interest in mind? Rapport can help you start to establish this. And so, really, we want to just basically have a conversation. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, if we're in Edmonton, some safe things to talk about are probably always going to be the weather, which is always crazy. It's always changing. It's always up and down. This morning I woke up and at like 7 a.m. it was +7 outside, and I was like, "What? How could that be?" But yet it was. And so it's crazy how it fluctuates here in Edmonton. But it's always a great conversation um, starter. Things such as the Oilers hockey is always a good conversation starter with folks, typically, and maybe to some extent potholes, but yeah, those would kind of be the things that are safe in a one-on-one environment. I personally believe it's totally okay to comment about things that you see around the office, kind of get to know that person, kind of ask if you see a degree on the wall. Hey, that's super impressive. Where did you get your degree from? How was your experience there? You're basically taking the time to understand that person and demonstrating a little bit that you have their best interest in mind. And that's kind of what the rapport component is all about. And I think this is where a lot of salespeople fall down, frankly, is you might know your product really, really well, but if you walk into that meeting, you just start to feature dump on someone, that meeting's probably going to go nowhere because you didn't take the time to understand this person's specific situation, and you didn't take the time to really understand this person. And so that's where, again, remember that model of trust. If you don't have my best interest in mind and you're just here simply to sell me a product, my trust in you is going to drop to zero. And at that point, we're probably going to end the meeting. And so this is why, again, I really encourage you to have a look at that model outside of the class, an integrated model of organizational trust. I think it's a paper from 1995. It's cited on Google Scholar about 14,000 times. And Schuurman, Davies, and Meyer, I believe, are the authors. And it's a phenomenal paper, and I believe it'll help us to really make some intentional moves towards establishing and building trust. And really, that rapport is kind of a good opportunity. And I hope you understand the logic of why rapport is a critical component of that. All right, I'm going to move into the next thing that I'm going to be looking for as we do these role plays. So once you establish some rapport, then I want you to and look for a natural transition spot here, because sometimes you'll hear in these role plays, I will try my best to give you some kind of a natural transition where I will say something like, yeah, me and all the people around here, we'll set up every Oilers game. We like to set up a TV in the warehouse, and we all gather together to watch the Oilers game after hours, and it's just a great team bonding time. So I'm going from building rapport, talking about the Oilers. I'm hinting about the situation around my organization, and that's a great time to set the agenda. Hey, I'm really glad you mentioned your team and the warehouse, because that's exactly why I'm here today. Do you still have 10 to 15 minutes for me to find out a little bit more about you and your organization? And a couple things are critical here. First, I really mean that. I'm here to find out about them and their organization. And the reason I say that goes back to how you build trust in terms of really taking a personal interest in that person. The other thing I want you to be highly conscious of is after you introduce yourself and your company and the features and benefits associated with the products that you're there to represent do not come up again until the value statement. Okay, so nowhere after you set the agenda in the inquiry phase should you be mentioning your products, your features, and benefits of those products. You don't bring them up at all until the value. This is all really taking the time to find out about that person, about that organization, and the reason we'll set the agenda here, because it helps smooth the transition from rapport into more of a business conversation, but also to make sure we've still got that time that's booked. So if you booked a 15-minute meeting, you still have 15 minutes for me to find out a little bit more about you and your organization. And because you never know. I mean, there could be something that came up where, you know what, somebody on the warehouse just dropped a pallet on their foot, and I need to drive them to the office. I drive them to the hospital, pardon me. And I'm just here because I wanted to just kind of. I told you I'd have a meeting, but it's kind of I've got this thing I got to do right after this meeting. If that happens, full stop, rebook that meeting, and take that person's best interest in heart, and just go, you know what, you got somewhere you need to be, you need to go and do that, and I'm happy to have this meeting at a later time. Same thing if there's something going on, you never know, like something could have happened with their kids at school or something like that, and so it's just always really good to make sure that we agree we're going to dedicate this next 15 minutes. And it's really important to kind of be conscious of that and to kind of manage your expectations a little bit by not having a 20-minute, a 30-minute meeting. You need to wrap up in 15, because that's the time you two agreed to. That was the original deal, and you need to stick to it. And it doesn't matter how good you think it's going, you need to stick to the deal. And so I would encourage you to wrap it up at about 14 minutes. And I'm not saying set a stopwatch, but I'm saying you should be conscious of the time, and you should not, by any means, be thinking about going over that. And by all means, you could say, hey, if you want, we could continue this somewhere else, or why don't we just book another time? And depending on how it's going, why don't I take another 30 minutes? This has gone really well. Or this is where it's an opportunity to invite them for coffee or lunch, and something like that as well. But just be conscious that that first meeting, you are managing expectations, and what you're saying is happening. And I think that's really important to set the agenda. And again, you're welcome to use my words here, and it probably flows from me pretty straightforward, simply because I've said it a million times. Do you still have 10 to 15 minutes for me to find out a little bit more about you and your organization? Um, and then, boom, that's all you have to do. Agenda set. Now we move into the inquiry phase. And in the inquiry phase, this is where we move into what we were talking about earlier, Neil Packham and his book called Spin Selling. And so SPIN is another acronym, and it basically stands for situation, problem, implications, and need payoff. And again, you're welcome to buy the book. It's probably a worthwhile read. For our purposes, when we go into this inquiry phase, I want you to think about SPIN. And in fact, when you set your agenda, you might even want to say, mind if I take some notes? And the reason why uh, is because then you have that opportunity to take notes either physically in front of them with a piece of paper and a pen, or on your keyboard. It can be very, very distracting if you're trying to talk to someone and all you're hearing is keys going. Whoops, I was trying to simulate it and I broke my own presentation. But try to I have their agenda notes because I think it's important that you might want to do that. Mind if I take some notes? And it's always good practice to make notes. And this is where we talk about a customer relationship management system, something like Salesforce, or or even if you just want to have physical notes, that's fine too. However you want to organize it, take notes. It's super important that you document your understanding of the situation, and you take a little bit of notes about what you discussed in terms of rapport. What are they interested in? A little bit about their family situation. Whatever you can, um, document those insights that you gain from this meeting. So situational. This is where it's a high level view of what's happening within that organization. And so this is where we might want to ask, so tell me a little bit more about your day-to-day life, or what goes on in your organization. Tell me a little bit about what you're responsible for around here. Tell me a little bit about some of your goals. How's that been going? Tell me a little bit about just your I like to do an overview of the situation. Here's the goal of the situational questions as I see it. Paint a mental picture for yourself about what's going on in this organization day to day. Understand what's happening in this organization. And the better job you can do of painting a mental picture for yourself about what's happening in this organization, the better you'll understand the situation, and ask those open-ended questions. Get the dialogue flowing. We read about open-ended questions. This is your opportunity to apply your learning and to really ask those open-ended questions. And we're going to ask open-ended questions until we hear a problem, and then full stop. When I ask, so how's that going? And they say, well, it was going great until last week. It's like, stop, full stop. That's your little nugget, a little piece of gold. That little insight was your opportunity to transition the problem. And the biggest um, misstep that can happen when asking situational questions is when people will write down a whole bunch of questions and they're not listening. And instead, they're just reading those questions. And in the end, they run out of questions and they've gained nothing. They've gained no knowledge from that meeting because they were just there to read a list of questions. Wrong approach. It's fine to think about in advance some questions you're going to ask. That's fine. But as soon as you unlock that problem, full stop. Wait a minute, tell me more about what happened last week. Well, last week we had a problem with our blank. And that's your opportunity to really move it into the implications. Especially if it's related to a feature and benefit you might have in mind. And this is where the pieces start to come together, where you have to start to think about, hey, is this related to something that I can offer? Is this, might I have a solution to this problem? And don't say it, but this is where we're going to take the time to explore it. Another key problem that comes about, and I'm sorry to use the word problem, but another a key misstep that occurs is someone will hear problem. And when they hear a problem, they're like, oh, I got a solution for that. And they immediately jump to the value statement. Remember when I said You shouldn't mention your company, your organization, your features and benefit again until the value statement. What happens sometimes is we get so excited that we hear about a problem is we immediately jump to the value statement, and we've kind of lost our way. We've lost the opportunity to establish value before we mention features and benefits. We have to first establish that, and how we do that is through the implications. And so you uncover a problem, and this is your chance to go into the implications. So what happens when that problem occurs? Tell me more about that. And maybe something fails. Maybe there's an expense, so we got to rework it. So there's an expense associated with that. Tell me more about how you rework something. Does that mean you have to set the job up again? Do you actually ship the product and then it gets returned? So your customers are kind of dissatisfied. Then you have to set the job up again. You got to run the job again. You got to re-QC it. You got to reship it. Man, that sounds expensive. Tell me more about that. What do you think that costs you every time that problem occurs? And this is where you're going to listen really closely, because the costs associated with a problem might establish the value of your product and what it is you're offering today. And that's really what you want to try to listen for. And so how often does that happen? So if the cost is a couple $1,000 and it's happening every 2 weeks, wow. You mean to say that this problem is costing you $4,000 a month? Holy smokes, in a year, what are we up to, like $50,000? And it's cool to just throw out some round numbers like that, but always have in the back of your head kind of the price of what you're offering, right? So part of that original direction was understanding the features and benefits, and also understanding your product lines, and understanding for yourself a little bit about what is it that you're offering in terms of products and the costs associated with those products. And here, as we move into the implications, we start to unlock the opportunity to go, wow, after seeing those costs and that cost of $50,000 a year, man, I can definitely see the need for a better blank. And here the blank might be the benefit to one of your features and benefits. A better uh, a better way of moving products around the shop, a better way of getting through those doors, a better way of moving products around without having them spilling on the ground. So this is where it's so important to have the features and benefits in mind, because now you're basically unlocking, if you will, one of the benefits, and you've established value of that benefit to that person in your spin selling. And so, if they agree with you at this point and they say, yeah, for sure, I could use that benefit, then you already know in your mind that, wow, I know that this problem is costing this company $50,000 a year, and my solution will benefit them in a way that solves that problem. And that's critical. Now you've kind of established in your own mind, wow, they'd be crazy not to buy this product because my product is, we'll use an example here. My product is $5,000. It's costing them, the solution that I'm going to offer with my product is uh, is going to save them 50,000 a year. Heck, this thing is going to pay for itself in a month and a half. And in your mind, you can kind of get excited about it, and know that, gosh, I think I can create great value for this customer and save them a lot of money. But you might go further. And in this course, what I want to try to do is I want everyone to do at least 2 spins before they give me the value statement. And so your second spin might be, once you've established that first one, I can definitely see the need for this benefit as it provides a solution to that problem. Once you've done that, you might want to go back to some other situational questions. And so some situational questions, tell me more about that, whatever situation you talked about before, or tell me a little bit more about, or you also mentioned safety as something that's important to your company or organization, or you also mentioned safety as a part of your goals here, is that you've been having some problems with safety, or tell me more. Let me just stop. I don't want to speak for you. Tell me more about why safety is such a big deal for you, and let them talk. Let them talk in an open-ended kind of way. Have you ever had a time where something unsafe happened? Tell me more about that. What happened in that during that time? What do you think caused that? Now you've hopefully unlocked another problem. And the implications around safety might be significant. We might not be as uh, monetary as the first problem you uncovered, but nonetheless, it might be equal or of greater importance around safety. And so we have to really unlock what's important to this prospect. And if early on in the rapport, when or early in a spin question, you heard a conversation about, or you heard when listening to them about safety being a big deal in terms of the goals or revenue, it gives you a hint a little bit about where some problems might be. So here, if there's a safety issue, tell me more about what happened with that when that occurred. Again, we're kind of connecting it to the problem. Dig deeper now into the implications, and I really want you to dig deep in the implications. I want you to dig deep in terms of understanding what happened. So somebody got injured. Were they off work for a while? Did you have to replace them? Were they able to return to work? How long were they off of work? Man, that sucks not only for that person, but did you guys continue to pay that person? Did you have to lay them off? Those kinds of questions can help you to understand, and maybe they had to rehire somebody new and train them up. Wow, hiring someone new, training them up. Not only did you lose a valued team member to part of your family, but which is sucks, and probably did that affect morale at all around here? Man, is morale something that's important to you? Yeah, I can definitely see the need for a system that doesn't have those injuries occurring, like you just said. Yeah, I agree. So once you've got a couple of spins done, and again, open-ended questions, make sure you drill down and dig deep in those implications. Acknowledge those needs as related to a benefit for your organ with that you have to offer that's tied to a feature. Now we can move to what we'll call the value. And the value statement, let me just back that up. The value statement can be quite simple. Here at Liftall or here at wherever, we offer this feature that's connected to the benefit from the first spin, and this feature that's connected to the benefit of the second spin. How does that sound to you? And it can really be that simple. So if I was to use an example, gosh, here at NAIT, we provide faculty with industry experience so that you know what to expect when you are hired in industry and you can hit the ground running. We also offer uh, uh, the degree, which means when you're applying for a job, that folks who are asking that you have a degree, you've got one, so you're a stronger candidate and more likely to get the interview based upon having your degree. How does that sound to you? Boom. So that would be kind of a value statement, if you will. And so that would be, you could connect that however you want, but you want to be really intentional about not mentioning every feature and benefit that you took the time to learn, but instead focus the conversations on the features and benefits that are of benefit to that individual, right? Those things which you just talked about. And do not go beyond that. And we'll learn why in a second. But focus, focus, focus. So again, we haven't talked about our company since we introduced ourselves originally, but now we're introducing ourselves and we're talking about the features and benefits specifically as related to problems that this individual is experiencing. Cool. So that's the value statement. Well, what's going to happen? Well, as soon as you offer your product, your features and benefits, the detours are going to come up. And I mean that because if you do not do complete at least a couple of spins and establish in your own mind before bringing up your solution in the value statement, what's going to happen is that person is going to begin with a detour process. And I will acknowledge that detours can occur anytime in a conversation. But I firmly believe, and it's been my experience, that detours are way more likely to occur after you mention your solutions, after you mention your company and your features and benefits. Oh, I don't need that, or what have you. But if you keep on track with the agenda that you originally set, I'm here to find out a little bit more about you and your organization, you're less likely to encounter direct detours because you never gave them the chance. You never talked about your company. You've never talked about the features and benefits related to your products. So that's why you want to kind of, in my opinion, you want to focus on establishing value through the two spins before you give your value statement, because what's going to happen when you give your value statement is the detours are going to occur. And so what are the detours? Well, the first one is just a basic misunderstanding. Hey, you know what? That neat place sounds great, but I'm working full time and I don't have time. I live out in Leduc. I don't have time to drive in the Neat, and so um, yeah, sorry, I can't do it because I don't have time to take those physical classes. To which, if you're working for Nate, you would probably say something like, "Well, our polytechnic actually allows for classes, all of our classes, to be taken online." And so you do not have to come to campus in order to be successful in attaining a diploma or a degree. So I want you to rest assured that that's just not an issue. Oh, okay, cool. And then they might say, well, here's the thing, and this is where we kind of move into some skepticism and some proof statements. And so they might say something like, well, you know, I've talked to every college, I've talked to every university, every polytechnic, and they all say the same thing. They all say they're the best. And so, with all due respect, what else would I expect you to say except that you're the best? And so this is where this idea of skepticism, that they're not really believing what you're saying. And so you've probably experienced this in an interview where you've given them a cover letter, you've given them a resume, and they're like, this is a little too good to be true. Uh, Thanks, but no thanks kind of thing. And then what you would do at that moment is probably give them your references. Go, look, I don't expect you to believe me. I know I sound fantastic, but I don't expect you to believe me. Here's a list of my references that you can call in order to confirm that what I'm saying is true. And in here, in our situation, this is where we're going to have some testimonials. This is where we're going to have some folks who've tried our products, experienced it, and they've said good things about us. They've had good experiences. And so they might even want to contact one of our previous customers, and that's totally, totally fine. But the thing you have to remember is you have to be gathering this information before this meeting, because you have to anticipate at some point there's going to be some skepticism, and you've got to have proof about what it is you're saying. In practice, what we'll do is something like sending out a survey, what we'll call a net promoter score, and we'll ask people who've experienced our products, our services, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our solution? And the 1 through 6, the experience was bad. If somebody gives you 1 through 6, maybe in your survey, you've got a comment box as well. You might want to send those over to your customer support area and find out what went wrong, because customers' expectations were not met there. And so, boom, that's the 1 through 6. The 7, 8s are kind of like, yeah, it was an okay experience, but I could have got the experience anywhere else and it would have been equally as good. The 9 or the 10s are the folks who loved it. These are the enthusiastic supporters of what it is that you're doing. And I would say on that survey, when you send it out, give the comment box again, allow them to make a comment about why the experience was what it was. Obviously, it was awesome and went above their expectations in this case. And then follow up with them, ask them for the testimonial, maybe send them a link to hey, can you give us that feedback on Google reviews, on Yelp? Mind if I use it on our website, that specific testimonial? Mine, and this is where you probably want to even put this inside of your sales brochures or have it with you in terms of your proof statement in case you're challenged about these things. And note that different uh, people will have testimonials related to different features and benefits. It's kind of like if you went to Toyota and you had a really good experience with a Sienna, and the salesperson who's trying to sell you a uh, a Toyota Tundra brings out the testimonial about the Sienna, the Tundra buyer is going to look at you like you're crazy because it's going to go, well, it's got nothing to do with my vehicle. I'm concerned about the box room, and the Sienna doesn't have a box. So we want to make sure that not only are we gathering testimonials, but we're sort of making those testimonials topic specific or solution specific, product specific. And so we've got different testimonials depending upon where our client skepticism is based. And I think that's really important. So again, in terms of practice, what I would recommend doing is spending some time understanding the Net Promoter Score. Go ahead and implement that through a basic survey. You could use Google Surveys, gather that data, identify your 9s and 10s, and you should be doing this as well as your organization. Identify your 9s and 10s. Um, ask for those testimonials. Ask for written um, written testimonials for website. You could even ask if it's for you, the person. You could even ask for a testimonial on your LinkedIn profile. Right? Hey, you know what? That I'm so glad we've got such a great relationship. One of the things I want to do is build confidence with the community around me. And I know that a lot of folks will, when they see my name, they'll Google me and my LinkedIn profile comes up. If you could drop exactly what you wrote here, I don't want you to rewrite anything. I know your time is super valuable, but if you could drop this as kind of a testimonial for myself and my LinkedIn profile, that would do wonders for me helping other people who are in a similar situation as you because they can more confidently engage with me and deal with me. And so that's how you can personally benefit from this system. But anyway, when we come back to skepticism, having those proof statements is super important. And inside of this role play, you will be provided with some proof statements as we cover the Detour module. So it's really important that you print those, have those, read those over before that actual role play, even highlight for yourself key features and benefits, key insights that these testimonials relate to, kind of like the Sienna and the Tundra driver. Make sure you read them over, highlight for yourself what this is specifically for, and have that kind of ready to go when we cover the Detours module. The next thing is basically a drawback. And when we talk about drawbacks in this course, um, oftentimes it's a pricing challenge. And this is going to be something like, man, that sounds great, but it also sounds pretty expensive. And so if you were following earlier when we did our spin selling, my answer to that would be I would kind of been waiting for this opportunity for you to tell me it sounds expensive. And the reason why would be to remind you of what you told me earlier. You told me that your problem, I wouldn't be this aggressive, but I would say, you know what? There's price and then there's value. And I get it. These are tough times. The recession is all around us. Inflation is going through the roof. Interest rates are going up. But what I want to do is I want to focus on the value we're creating. You said that the problem that you're experiencing is costing you $4,000 a month, and we agreed that it was going to probably cost you about $50,000 a year. the solution I'm recommending to save you the $50,000 is going to cost you $5,000. So it's 10%. I think the solution will pay for itself in a month and a half. But more than that, we also talked about injuries and folks getting hurt and that affecting morale, and more than that, having to maybe hire some new people and bring them into your family because somebody else got hurt and weren't able to return the work, and that hurts your morale. So I don't want you to lose anyone in your family anymore. And yeah, it's $5,000. It's going to pay for itself in a month and a half. And I don't want you or anyone that works here ever have to worry about that problem again, because that's going to go away and people will be able to more confidently do their jobs, and they won't have to put up barriers worrying about who's next and who are we going to lose out of our family next. How does that sound to you? Boom. So there's your drawback. And again, that's why it's so important to go through those spin and not to go right from problem to your value statement, because the implications are what matter. The implications are what's going to win or lose the game, because there's always going to be the pricing drawback in my mind anyway. It's always coming. And so you need to establish for yourself value before you ever engage the client and mention the value of what it is you're doing. You need to establish that for yourself. If you don't see the value for yourself and what it is you're about to say, don't say it. Don't say it, because you're just going to encourage them to begin the detours, which will ultimately lead to that drawback around pricing. And you haven't established for yourself that the price of what you're offering is less than the solution you're providing. If you haven't established for yourself, there's no way the client's going to see it. So do not engage until you understand that you've gone through your implications really well, because that drawback, it's coming up. It's coming up. There's always going to be a reason that they can't do it. Cool. So for the purpose of this course, those are the three things that we're going to be talking about when we talk about a detour. I will probably do all of them, unless you've really, if you hit your implications out of the park, sometimes I won't do the drawback, but typically I will. But those will kind of be the three. And as we go through the course, I'll always go from beginning all the way to the end. Well, sorry, I'll always start at the beginning, and every time we're going to go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. But moving to the next phase, then, once we've kind of gone through those detours, you've kind of got your buying signals, you've answered sort of the questions that were being asked after you brought up your company, your features and benefits. What I want you to do is to just remind them of what we discussed today and the value you've created. And so this is where, how does that sound to you? They say, actually, it's sounding really good. When you're getting those buying signals, those nodding, those kind of agreeing, I want you to re-summarize the value that you created in the first two spins. So what we talked about today was how you were experiencing this problem, and it was causing you this kind of whatever the implications might be, or just focus in on, just like we did it with our previous value statement here. So just to kind of recap what we talked about today, here at Liftall, we provide this feature, which with this benefit, so you won't have to worry about that problem anymore. And this feature with this benefit, so you won't have to worry about that problem anymore. And further, we also offer and tie it to the misunderstanding. So in our example today, I might say we also offer all of our classes are online, so you don't have to worry about commuting in. Make those strong connections throughout. How does that sound to you? If they sound great, move to execution, which are your next steps. So if you might move them to, you might try to close them. How about we order you one today, see how it works out? Or you might go, look, this is a really pressing problem. We talked about today, you're in the situational questions, was the fact you're currently using 3 of these items. If we switch over to the new item, our new solution, we can immediately start seeing those benefits next week. How about we put an order in for all 4? We are out with we'll take away your old, we'll bring in the new, and you can start experiencing the benefits on Monday. How does that sound to you? Boom. But it doesn't always go that way. You might not want to move to sign on the dotted line. You might just recommend a trial. You might recommend whatever next steps you have in mind, you might give it to them, and yeah, some kind of a trial, some kind of whatever next steps you want to do some training, etc. But whatever the execution is, do it. Once that's done, clear and concise, you're done. Once you've got the deal, you've established value, they've agreed to the next steps. That's it. That's when you leave. And I think a mistake would be to hang out for them to find maybe another problem, or for you to introduce an unexpected problem. Again, you don't want to start introducing new features and benefits. You don't want to start to tell them about all the great other things you've memorized. It's meaningless at this point. If anything, it might distract, it might kill the deal. So focus in on execution, getting it done. Thank them very much for their time. The 15 minutes is up. Let's go. And that's kind of the overview of Drive. Cool. All right, so I'm going to take you back now, and we're going to go back to our course a little bit. And again, I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so that's kind of the overview. Inside of here, what you'll find is I mentioned before that we're going to be going through these bit by bit, and we're always going to start from the top. So it's always important that you're here. And so what we establish is basically, if you miss a class, you can't recover from that, right? I mean, you can try to go forward, but you've missed a critical component. So if you miss any class, any unexcused, I mean, and please, an email to me in the morning is not an excused absence. If you're not there, expect a 15% penalty period. But the good news is there's only 5 classes. We'll only meet 5 times. And what we're going to do is each class, we're going to progressively learn a little bit more. So in class number 1, we're going to go through direction rapport. I've also given you a little bit of overview today. So please go through those modules inside of Moodle before coming to class today. In terms of your next class, go through the inquiry and value models that we kind of talked about today. And the next class, we're going to go through all the way from the beginning every time. So we're going to introduce ourselves, do rapport, set the agenda. Mind if I take some notes? We're going to go through spin. Then we're going to go into our detours and execution, class number 3. So we'll have seen the full model in class number 4. We're going to do it again. We're going to use role play number 4. And then our final exam will be role play number 5 that you'll print out of your Moodle. So that's how this is going to go. Forget the Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sorry, I should have deleted that. But just focus in on class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5. A part of your direction is to make sure you've kind of gone through these modules before you come. So class number 1, we talk about going through the modules of direction and rapport. So with the direction module, so I'm going to jump back here in terms of our drive. In the directions, what it's going to tell you to do. Again, ignore the flash. It's not working. So that's why I'm kind of doing these extra long videos to try to give you a little bit more background information, but I still expect you to go through these modules. So read through, go to your next, read through. So it talks a little bit about this company. That's not the company you've been assigned, and ignore anything to do with the simulation. The simulation at the moment isn't working, so we're not going to worry about that right now. Click to next, and here's I want you to download this file, and when you click on this, it kind of shows you the features and benefits for the ultimate copying machine. And it's not a bad idea to do that, primarily because you can see what it looks like. And that's kind of what I want you to do for the company you've been assigned, Liftall. And how I want you to do it is on this sheet. So download this features and benefits, which looks very much like this features and benefits sheet, and just fill it in. And how are you going to fill it in? Well, download the appropriate background information for your product. So this is where we go here. Here's Liftall. Boom. there's the background information I want you to read through. And as you're reading it, I want you to note things like price that I already talked about. I want you to note things like capacity for yourselves. And I want you to note things like the features and benefits. That's what's going to be critical. Understand and come up with some features and benefits for yourself. And I think that's where part of the direction really comes in, is understanding what are the features and benefits of this forklift. Cool. So that's why we're going to go through these. Um, and look, it says lift all. I don't expect you to look at the other ones, but lift all is there. So go ahead. Then we click on next. There's a little bit here in terms of impression management, a little bit here in terms of how you look, um, how you dress for success. I'm not worried about it in our class, but nonetheless, I think it's a really great thing to be conscious of. And it's a really great thing, a really great reminder to kind of dress for the job you want. And so dress appropriately when you're meeting with people. So we're going to go along. There's some extra information from Tech Trust you can look at here, but here is congratulations, you've completed the direction module. You've read through it. Now click on the rapport. So we go up here. Here's rapport, and it kind of goes through the same things I just talked about: introduction, small talk, build trust, set that agenda. And so once you've kind of read through these things, jump to the next one. It kind of gives you a couple examples, which I think are fine. Bear in mind those things which I spoke about. Here in terms of small talk, they talk about painting on the wall, construction nearby, the weather, sports, entertainment, kind of those things that we already spoke about. Things that probably not so good. Religion and politics, yep, probably not very good. Personal pictures of family members, I mean, that's probably not so good, but it might be okay. I mean, to the extent you might comment about some scene in the background of a picture, fair enough. But if you're saying, man, your child has a really crooked smile or something like that, that's probably not okay. It's cool. So we're going to move forward here, read through this stuff, and uh, building trust. Keep in mind an integrated model of organizational trust, integrity, benevolence, ability. But here's some other things that they speak to you about, which I think is good. When you go through that, note one of the things that they talked about. I wonder if I can restart this. Hold on. I just want to point something out here, which I 100% agree with. Here, building trust. Do not ask questions related to your product. Remember what I said, and inevitably people make this as a huge mistake. After you introduce yourself, and your company, do not talk about your company, your features and benefits again until the value statement. Okay, so they're kind of reinforcing that key idea here. All right, so read through these things and boom, download role play number 1 and bring it to class. Well, don't just bring it to class, read it before class. So when I click on lift all here, here is role play number 1. Okay, so once you know your features and benefits, once you've read your background, you've done the features and benefits as related to the direction component of this class. Now we're going to be going through this. You're going to know who specifically you're going to be meeting with in role play number 1. Not much for details here, but enough details to know who you're going to be meeting with. And then after that, you're going to figure out the rest of the situation by asking those situational questions. So it's really important to always look for those role plays. This is role play 1. This is exactly where it is. Cool. So proceed to the drive simulation. We're going to skip that. But that's really your rapport. So that's kind of the expectations for class number 1, just kind of an overview. Then, boom. Hold on. Did I lose my page? Here it is. All right. So that's role play number 1, direction rapport. I've also provided a couple extra things for you here. So I'm not expecting everyone to be a forklift expert. So I've provided some information here about forklifts and specifically free lift. I'm going to Google something here, and you're all welcome to free lift forklift. You're all welcome to use Google as much as you like. And one of the things you'll see about your forklift is they talk about a free lift feature. Well, who knew? But here is an actual video about a free lift feature. So again, if you're wondering about any of the features that it's talking about, Google them. Here is the example. Actually, I'm going to share it. Hold on. I'm going to share this again, and I'm going to share the audio. Hang on. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to begin it again and share the audio.
Full free lift on a forklift means that the forks can be raised without immediately extending the inner mast channels. Full free lift is available only on masts that have free lift cylinders. A free lift cylinder consists of a lift cylinder rod and assembly that is used to lift the carriage prior to the rear cylinders engaging. This allows the carriage and forks to be lifted to a certain point prior to the inner mast rails. In many cases, you can get several feet of free lift depending on the mast design. Full free lift is helpful in areas where you need to lift the load but have to be mindful of overhead obstructions. Common areas where this is useful are for buildings with low ceiling heights and on trailers or boxcars. This is a free lift cylinder or primary cylinder. These are rear cylinders or secondary cylinders. When a forklift has limited free lift, it means that the inner mast rails will extend either immediately or shortly after lift is requested. Limited free lift occurs with single-stage masts and two-stage masts with no free lift cylinder. The amount of free lift can vary based on the condition and adjustment of the forklift's lift chains, as well as other factors such as fork thickness. Penn West Industrial Lift, lifting.
Cool. So again, as you come across some features and benefits, feel free to Google them. Make sure you understand them. The other thing I'd recommend having a look at, because we've been assigned lift all forklifts, is make sure you're familiar with one of the alternatives, which is just a manual hand jack. And that's all that this is. There'll be a ton of videos on manual hand jacks, but nonetheless, I've provided you this image so that you can, it's even got my name on it. There it is. Look at that. I'm self-promoting here. But again, the manual hand jack, just so you're a little bit familiar with it. And that's in our basic forklift knowledge folder. So in terms of, yeah, kind of I think we've kind of covered, that's inside of your modules, our drive training instructions. Once you've gone through your features and benefit sheet that we're talking about before, so you've kind of read through your background, you've come up with some features and benefit, you wrote those out, you've kind of got your role play one, you can go back to these drive instructions here, and I've created for you in your instructions. I should pull up the actual Excel spreadsheet. So I've created for you some features and benefits that I've come across. Now note on the bottom, the tabs, this is Protex, this is one of the different products, Marmot, and this is Liftall. And so you can compare kind of what you came up with to kind of some of the ones that I've come up with. There's more, but you can kind of see my list as well. Cool. But do try to do it yourselves before you go to that list. So, but feel free to use the list. For sure, be familiar with the list, the whole list, before coming to class. Again, that's part of your direction. You have to be familiar with your product, the features and benefits, before coming to class. Awesome. So that's role play number one. Role play number two, we said in the second class, make sure you go through your inquiry and value. Role play number three, detours. Role play number four. And again, print out those role plays. It's going to be super important for you to understand who you're coming to see. Role play number 5 is the final exam. So your 5th role play will be someone new, and that's kind of perfect. And this is where we're going to put all the pieces together. So that's kind of yeah, that's kind of the overview of the final component to this course, which is drive selling. You're only going to be graded on first attendance. Remember, if you do not attend, you automatically lose 15%. The second component is you only are graded on that final role play, which we're going to do basically one-on-one in little 15-minute groups. And so one of the things that I'm going to try to do is, you probably notice that inside of our teams, we not only have our general teams channel, but we also have a specific office. And what I'm going to do is, my expectation is that the first class you're going to show up at the time we can kind of go through, which is today. We're going to gone through all the stuff, but at the end of class, what I'd like to do is I kind of want to assign time blocks where you can show up. So I'm going to minimize your commitment here in some ways synchronously in meeting with myself. And so I'm going to kind of give you probably 15-minute or 10-minute time blocks. And so your goal is to just show up in that time, wait in the general chat, and I will just phone you into the office, and you can leave that general chat and just kind of come into the office when I call you. And what we're going to do in the office is, I'm going to be working with everyone one-on-one for about that 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm going to record that session. And then what happens is, you'll all have access to that recording and that office until the beginning of next class, at which time I'm going to kick you all out so that I can again pull you in one-on-one. And again, part of the reason for that is I don't want to have you being interrupted during your time when you're doing the role play one-on-one. I don't want people coming in and out. I don't want microphones on, people accidentally doing whatever. I want you to focus in on that meeting, kind of simulate how it would be in a sales call. And so that's what we're going to do with our office. And I'm going to pull you in one by one. If you've already done your role play and you're in that office, you are welcome to either A, hang out quietly, or B, leave. And it's up to you. But what I would encourage everyone to do is to probably watch that content again before the following class. And the reason why is you can try to see how different people are asking different open-ended questions, which might unlock things in a way that you hadn't thought about. And that might be fantastic. Or see how somebody else is um, asking their situational questions. What kind of implication questions did they come up with? Because you're all using the same lift all forklift as well, you might even see people unlock different features and benefits than you had in mind. You might have found the session to be extremely challenging and never came to a resolution. And it's because you weren't aware of a feature and benefit that perhaps a colleague did understand and were able to more quickly unlock because of their understanding of that feature and benefit. And I think that's a good insight as well. And I think it kind of stresses the importance of that. So that's kind of how we're going to roll through this. And we'll set up those in a minute. And I think that'll be great as well. All right, cool. So we've got some great information. Hopefully we're gonna have some five awesome classes together. But to kick us off and to kind of see kind of a real world example of this is Gabrielle. She's awesome. She's a super smart lady. You can find her on LinkedIn. I don't even know where she's at now because her career progression's been on fire. And let me see where she's at. What is she up to now? She is phenomenal. So she's managing strategic accounts at Airtable. She was with Gong. I think when I first met her, she was probably back here somewhere. She came and she she lives in Chicago, or she was at the time. She actually came and spoke in one of our classes previously. So she's phenomenal. She's absolutely a huge supporter of anything to do with sales, anything to do with professional selling, and she lives and breathes it. And so I'm going to inspire you all when we think about direction a little bit. And I'm going to give you all some keywords from the brilliant and talented Gabrielle.
Excuses, y'all. We can no longer keep using a lack of product information as an excuse as to why we can't do something or why we're not performing well enough. So, lack of product information or knowledge, that's going to come over time. That's going to come through training. It's going to come through asking people certain questions. It's going to come through experience. But there are other ways to maneuver around a lack of knowledge. And that is going to be really where intellectual curiosity is going to be activated. So there's a couple of tips that I'll recommend as somebody who was in an account executive seat at a new company and didn't understand exactly like what we were selling or who we were selling it to. And so these are exercises that I went through to help myself go from having $0, like 0 deals booked, 0 closed $1, to then being at 193% of my quota in a very short amount of time. And so the first thing that I did is I went to our top 3 performing account executives and I interviewed them on what it took for them to put themselves in that position of being a top performing rep. And so I learned everything from the specific sales tactics they use, the upfront contracts they had at the beginning of conversations, the way they researched companies, the ways they structured a call, even down to the things that they were reading, like the level of research that they were doing in their off hours. So I really got into the mind of the top performing people, and I started to understand what it took to be a top performing AE. So that's the first part. The second part here, to get around a lack of product knowledge, is to better understand what your customers are actually doing with your product and what they are supporting, like what your product is supporting for your customers. And so the best way, I think, to do that is to start shadowing quarterly business reviews. Reach out to your customer success folks or your account managers and ask if you can shadow some of the conversations that they're having with your customers, and plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many points you need, if you can also get to interview your customers as well yourself and ask them questions such as, hey, help me understand what was going on before you purchased. Like, walk me through what your buying journey actually looked like. Everything from, hey, I'm aware that I have a problem, to I have an understanding of how I'm going to approach solving that problem, to now being at your company or being a customer of your company and how they're leveraging the product that you're selling. And then the third piece here, right? And there's probably lots of other tips that can be shared. But one thing that I think is super important is, if you are a newer rep, or even just a rep that's been there for a while and is struggling, is manage be proactive with your manager, with your director, and let them know where you see the gap. So if product knowledge is a gap for you or a roadblock for you, employ your manager to help build a plan for you to be able to bridge that gap. If there is something specific in your sales process, right? Hey, I noticed that only 50% of the deals that I bring into discovery are converting over into the next stage. Can you help me figure out what that is? Right? You should be the person going to your manager and letting your manager know, hey, here's specifically where I'm seeing a gap or an opportunity for improvement. Please help me, right? Please work with me in order to be able to resolve that. So those are like a few of the tips that I can share to get over any excuse as to why you can't be successful in a sales role. So that's it. Have a good one. Bye.
Aw, she's awesome. I love her. All right. I'm going to stop our recording. And yeah, thanks, everyone.